Hi, everyone.
Hi, Dorcas.
You are welcome. Sorry, I've been having some internet problems.
Thank you. Yeah, we have to share the new link to others, please.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yes, I hope the new link has been shared.
Just give a couple of minutes for us to share, please.
Oh, okay, please. Thank you. Let's give a couple of minutes for people to join.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome. We're just giving a little time for other members to join. The recurring meeting link was invalidated. I am very sorry. And I apologize also for the background. I have to take this meeting in the lobby where there is a lot of noise. So I think one more minute and then we'll start. Thank you very much.
Okay. Look, you want to share my screen or?
Chris, welcome to this meeting and thank you very much for accepting to present today.
Pleasure.
I apologize also, most of our heads of breeding have a clashing meeting with some engagements regarding with one CGR. So most of them are not joining, but we are happy to hear from you as our colleagues join. I would like to introduce Chris Lambrides. Most of us know Chris. He's been working with us on BPAT, evaluating our breeding programs, and also giving feedback on some areas that we need to improve on. Chris has been working quite with the Accelerated Breeding Initiative. And today he's accepted to make a presentation about the lessons learned so far from BPAT and what would be the plans moving forward with BPAT. Chris is from the University of Queensland, as we may all know. And at this point, I would like to give the floor to Chris. Chris, very welcome. And I apologize for the invalid link. Thank you.
I have one, but anyway. So you can see my presentation?
Yes, full screen now.
Yeah, all good. Excellent. Okay, so why don't I go ahead? I'll introduce myself. Good evening, good morning from wherever you're from, wherever you are, sorry. There's somebody probably needs to mute themselves. I can hear some feedback.
Yes, there's some feedback. Please, people, just
BPAT, what has it achieved, some of the issues and opportunities revealed by BPAT, and where to from here. Okay, the origin of BPAT. Probably most of you won't know that the BPAT was the brainchild of the BMGF Ag Development team. So they needed an assessment tool to benchmark their plant breeding investments into CG programs and ultimately to help drive a modernisation agenda. So they went ahead, BMGF went ahead and contracted 2 private sector plant breeding consultants to put together the BPAT tools. They then tendered out the BPAT project in 2015, and UQ was fortunate enough to get the grant at the end of 2015. Now, shortly after the BPAT grant was issued, the Excellence in Breeding platform was established, and these 2 BMGF investments were all about driving a modernisation agenda for CG NAS breeding programs. Okay, so what is BPAT? It's basically a series of survey tools used to evaluate the effectiveness of plant breeding programs. Obviously, the focus was CG and NAS programs. So basically, we set out to identify strengths and areas for improvement. And the basic theme behind the assessment process is to use criteria commonly used to evaluate commercial plant breeding programs. So obviously the tool was written by 2 private sector plant breeders, and the idea was to use the thinking behind high performing private sector plant breeding programs. Ultimately, the objective has been to plan effective breeding programs and drive rates of higher genetic gain. Okay, so what have we done so far? So we've been going for about 9 years, and incredibly, we've done over 100 BPATs. So with those assessments have come an enormous, there's been an enormous learning curve for us as assessors, and hopefully for the people we've assessed. And so hopefully in this presentation, we can point out some of the things that we've learned and some of the issues that still need to be addressed. So the BPATs, the target locations and crops, this graphic demonstrates that. You can see most of the breeding programs were located in Africa, then Asia, and our remit did extend across to Latin America. You can see the crops, the staple food crops known to you all, grains, roots, tubers, and banana, and legumes. Okay, so when we received the BPAT tools, they were not in the order that they appear today. So effectively, what we did at the University of Queensland is we rearranged the tool and came up with 11 components. And I'm just going to go through those 11 components so that people have a good idea of what process we take during each assessment. Basically, we have questions. The total tool consists of more than 100 questions broken up into these 11 components. So we start off asking questions about breeding objectives and product profiles. Given those product profiles, we ask, well, what breeding team does the institution have to address those product profiles? We then ask questions about the infrastructure. Given the breeding team and the product profiles, what infrastructure is in place to address the product profiles? We then get into the nitty-gritty of the assessment, breeding methodology. So the breeding methodology is basically a series of questions around the breeder's equation. So we go in and we interrogate all aspects of the breeder's breeders equation. And this turns out to be the meaty part of the assessment, and where we carry out lengthy discussions with the breeders. And, it ends up being a fantastic discussion about plant breeding. And we always make it clear from the outset that the idea of this process is to lead the breeding teams through these discussions. And the team that we assemble doesn't have all the answers, but we're just trying to challenge the breeders to validate every step of their breeding. After we ask questions about breeding methodology, we ask about product development and release. We ask about impact of the program. One of the later additions to the BPAT process was we asked about innovation. So this is addressing, the idea of continuous improvement. And this has actually been quite a useful thing to do, because it's got the breeders thinking about, well, what am I doing now, but what can I do in the future? The last 18 months or so, there's been a real push to get a sense of where these NARCG networks are at. I think somebody else might need to mute themselves. So we have quite a few questions about NARS.
Please email Gusta Bravo. Yes, please mute. There is 2 or 3 people. Sorry, Chris.
No, that's fine.
Please go ahead.
No problem. I'll just, whilst they're muting, I'll just take a quick sweep. Well, I can still hear somebody.
Yes, Dorcas, can you mute these people, automatically when they join? Noah, Amanda. I don't know who is Noah, Amanda, but please, can you just mute yourself? Same with Wendy.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Eduardo. We then ask about how well the programs are aligned to other breeding programs. One of the really important aspects of the BPAT process is to ask about budget and finance. Basically, we're trying to work out here, do the breeders actually work out the breeding costs of their different breeding activities? The most recent addition to the BPAT assessment process was assessment of organisational effectiveness, because we all know that regardless of the quality of the breeding team, if the institution isn't set up to house the breeding teams in the best possible way, then they can't be effective. Okay, so that's the framework of our assessment. So this just gives you, this is a screenshot from our assessment tool. You can see we've got the 11 components here. We basically click on any one of these and it comes up with a whole series of questions. I'll show you an example of component 1 questions in a minute, but we've got the traffic light system, which is an effective way for us to sit back and have a look at the whole program with one screenshot. Okay, so here's some examples of some questions. This is component 1, breeding objectives and product profiles. And here is the first question, the very basic question that you might ask a breeding team. What are the key breeding program objectives? Okay, I have the privilege, I'm featuring 2 of the plant breeding consultants that come with me on many of the breeding program assessments. And I've highlighted Yilma and Mark because of about 100 of the 100 that we've done, they've probably participated in certainly more than 50 to 60% of those assessments. So I have the privilege of BMGF have provided me a budget where I can ask leading plant breeders in their disciplines to come and join the BPAT team, and we travel around the world and we assess these teams. So it's when we do assessments, we normally have from 3 to 4 to 5 assessors. We're here in East Africa at the moment with 4 assessors, but I just wanted to point out that one of the strengths of the BPAT process is having world-leading plant breeders sit on the team asking questions with lots of private sector experience, lots of public sector experience in the CG, in the NARS, again, in the private sector. Okay, so when we do an assessment, we have a process whereby we identify strengths of the breeding teams, and then we identify areas for improvement or opportunities for improvement that we like to call it now. So, okay, based on 9 years of experience, undoubtedly we have come across in just about every situation dedicated and experienced breeding teams, very smart scientists, highly capable, well published, have a really good understanding of the production constraints. They do quality science, have very good access to germplasm. There's been lots and lots of successful varieties, some of them mega varieties now. One of the issues, of course, is that many of the varieties released are quite old. The molecular teams are typically very strong, and also characteristically, they're very well aligned to international partners. Okay, so I went through the different components of the tool. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of the components and talk about some of the issues and opportunities for improvement that we came across. So starting with breeding objectives and target product profiles, if I was to pick one of the components where we've seen transformational change, it would have to be this one. So there's just been a huge improvement in defining of the target product profiles. So, module 1 of EIB, we have to take our hat off to the great work that EIB have done. And I've said this repeatedly. Really, if you sit back and look at the differences between what we saw in 2015-16 and what we see now, it really is amazing. And this particular area, the definition of target product profiles, this particular effort is led by Peter Coldrake, and he's done a fantastic job. That's not to say there isn't still work to be done. Many programs have now defined themselves, so they've used a standardized way of describing themselves as they have half X, 1X, 2X. So that's really important. They now have a good understanding of the resources they have and how much they can allocate to particular target product profiles. But as I said, still more work to be done. So our observations suggest that there can be some greater refining where some of the TPPs, there may be still too many. And of course, this concept of target product profiles is relatively new for quite a few of the breeding teams. So it's still going to take a number of years to have their thinking refined about target product profiles. And so they may find, given the resources they have and the target profiles they've described, that they will in fact be able to consolidate and potentially reduce the number of TPPs that they're targeting. There's no doubt that there's still a need for greater trait prioritization. And, most programs tend to have too many traits. So, it's the old plant breeding rule that the more traits you include in the breeding process, the less effective you're going to be for any one of those traits. The concept of one breeding pipeline per target product profile still hasn't bedded in yet. So, we had one breeder fairly recently say, oh, look, I've got 4 product profiles, but I've only got one pipeline. And so, certainly the resources at your disposal is going to govern exactly how many product pipelines you're going to have. But I think there's still more thought needed to go into just, the rationale of how you set the breeding program up. So the target product profiles need to be used as a guiding document for program design. It needs to be used, it needs to be, sat there for everybody to see, it needs to be transparent, and it needs to be used on an ongoing basis. In some of the more recent BPATs, we've noticed that it seems to be something that the breeders do, and they can sort of tick a box and then sort of move on. And it's not all situations is it being used as a guide to program design and to the execution of the breeding process. Okay, the last dot point's covered on my, okay. Oh, yeah, target product profile prioritization. So one of the things that we've noticed is that a gap analysis probably needs to be done. So where are the gaps in the target product profiles? The breeding teams need to be flexible and allocate their resources accordingly and identify the gaps in other target product profiles that may need the extra resources. So I think there's a certain rigidity that the breeders are seeking, but perhaps what we're suggesting is that there needs to be some level of flexibility to move resources around as they see fit. Okay, I'm clicking the next slide, but it's not moving. Let me just try. Okay. Okay, breeding organization. This is the breeding teams. So, you know, this is often governed by the resources at the disposal of the breeding program, but often agronomy and physiology research is lacking. And in the case where there are really strong world-class physiology teams, the physiology is not necessarily integrated well into the breeding programs. And so this is not a new issue. I know that when we started doing BPATs 8 or 9 years ago, we saw a similar occurrence of this issue. So there may be a need for cultural change in terms of the acceptance of physiology in plant breeding. Quite often we see disciplined scientists stretched over many projects shared across different crops. I'm not sure this is the optimum approach to get the disciplined scientists working effectively in a team. But again, this is largely governed by resources at the disposal of the institutions. Still, multiple disciplinary team approaches are lacking. And again, it's probably resource driven. And the last dot point here is a term that we coined back in 2016 during our very first BPAT, breeder's burden. So quite simply, we're saying, are we asking too much of the breeders? They've had a hell of a lot of change in the last 5 years. The modernization agenda is clearly necessary, but they've had to bear the brunt of a lot of different issues. So I hope the breeding leads that are sitting back listening to this can appreciate that you know, really the breeders are doing a great job, and they're continually being asked to stretch themselves across a whole range of different areas. Okay, infrastructure. In the 9 years, there really has been some terrific improvements in infrastructure. So the BPAT team had the pleasure of visiting Bouaké in Côte d'Ivoire, the headquarters of Africa Rice, and we really saw some significant improvements in infrastructure. So Gustavo and his team, Amir in this case, have really transformed the level of mechanization available to the breeding teams in that particular institution.
Sorry,
Electronic data capture.
please.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yes.
Sorry, seems my internet is acting out, but there is a comment that your voice might be breaking out.
Oh, breaking out. Okay. Is that?
I think maybe the internet of that
everywhere.
room. I hear it well.
Yeah, I think it's the receiving end of somebody's.
Okay. Yeah, look, it's always the way. I'm sitting here in Kampala. The hotel internet, I have to say, has been pretty good. In fact, I think I made the comment that, gee, it's better than Australia. But okay, so let me proceed. So look, electronic data capture really has been widely adopted. Most programs are using either BMS or EBS, although we are hearing concerns about the potential lack of support in the future for BMS. So that's something that we're hearing in the last few months. Okay, so some programs still lack high throughput phenotyping. Of course, they're very hard to set up. Lots of research is needed, particularly for quality and abiotic stress screening. You know, for RTB quality, high throughput screening of quality really is so important. And I'm not sure that we've got too many breeding teams that have really got these sorts of assays working really well. Abiotic stress screening, it's difficult. There's just no doubt about it. So some examples that we've seen recently, the struggles some of the breeding teams have had trying to select for salt tolerance. One of the most difficult abiotic stresses to select for in the field. Maintenance support for machinery and equipment. So we quite often hear that there is equipment that lands at institutions, but as soon as they break down, there is an issue in terms of getting them repaired and having ongoing maintenance. Okay, breeding methodology. No question, a huge improvement in the application of quantitative plant breeding approaches. I mean, thanks to the EIB, that was a heavy focus, and that, you know, there's clear and obvious improvement in this area. In many programs that we see, genomic selection is now entrenched. We had the pleasure of doing the NARO, so a NARS program, CASABA program, where they spoke of, you know, genomic selection approaches. So, you know, the stronger NARS programs are starting to use genomic selection, and they're doing it effectively. So that's really incredible to see in a relatively short time. Stage gates are in place. Again, I make the point here about additional trait prioritization may be needed. I've already made the point about abiotic stress screening, considerable improvements in testing program, METs. You know, there was right back at the beginning, there was, you know, a lot of the institutions were basically just testing on station. And quite clearly, most institutions have gone well beyond that now. Much better definition of TPEs, you know, proper G/E analyses have been conducted. Even the tricot approach is now, we're seeing that, you know, quite a bit. Even the CASABA program we did today with NARO have quite an effective tricot system in place. Data curation remains a challenge. Return of high quality data from partners is problematic, you know, basically due to variable NARS CG networks. So I know that this will always be a controversial issue that we probably need to be thinking about. Plotsmanship, okay, always a really big issue. Having good quality plots in the field, it's hard enough at HQ, but getting good plots at remote locations is always a challenge. Okay. Moving on to C5, product development and release. We've seen inconsistent involvement with NARS in terms of product advancement process. So I know that there has been a directive that the CG programs work closely with the NARS partners, but it is variable. We often hear that CG don't release cultivars. That's quite a common response. But we suspect the success of handover depends on the strength of the NARS partner. Okay, and of course, there is a lot of variation in terms of the strength of NARS partners. Program impact, product replacement continues to be slow, associated with seed systems. I think we're all aware of seed system issues. It's insufficient monitoring of post-release performance. Of course, you know, if you've got 5 million farmers in a country, and you know, hundreds of thousands are growing a new variety, it's pretty hard to get around to check on post-release performance. So that's always going to be a problem. So it's just a case of having some smart ways to monitor the performance of newly released cultivars. No question, genetic gain protocols have improved considerably. So, you know, most programs we come across now are using standardized methods of measuring genetic gain, but of course, still a work in progress. Estimation of realized heritability continues to be a challenge for obvious reasons when we're starting to look at, you know, on-farm performance. Innovation, no question, programs have become far more innovative, a greater commitment to continual improvement. Now, compared to some of the early BPATs, there's a really noticeable difference in this area. So they've become aware. So there's, you know, EIB have set up fantastic tools, websites for breeders to look through. There's been lots of trainings. So I think the message is really penetrating through the institutions. NARS CG networks, okay, this is really, again, a work in progress. So I know there's been a big push towards these networks. I attended the DLC rollout in Ghana at the beginning of last year. So the development of these networks was a big theme of that particular rollout. And I guess to sum up in brief, they're only, from what we can observe, they're only partially effective. There's lots of things happening, but you know, if we assess where the NARS programs are at, certainly the high-performing NARS programs are moving ahead well, but we have to ask that the majority of those NARS programs are probably not at that level yet. So we probably need to continue to develop metrics to determine the health of NARS CG networks. I know that we've added lots of questions in our assessment process, and we're starting to gather some data about that. So we always question the sustainability of NARS improvements, and this really will be an ongoing challenge for all of us. Alignment. Most programs are very well aligned. So there's lots of alignment, both nationally and internationally, lots of examples. There's the innovation labs, there's, you know, there's BMGF projects and ACR and GIZ and USAID. So they're on those donors link programs with various institutions around the world. Budget and finance. Quite typically, we see inefficient resource use because component breeding activities and operations are not costed. So therefore, cost metrics are not driving efficiencies. But I know there's been a big push to get breeding programs costed, and some of the bigger programs are certainly doing that and making progress. Organizational effectiveness. Certainly the appointment of breeding leads has been excellent. I know that one of the very first recommendations we made when we The very first BPAT we did was ICRISAT back in 2016. We put in a recommendation that a breeding lead be appointed, and sure enough, that did happen. And since subsequently, we've seen breeding leads appointed right across the CG. It seems to us there still is an education gap, not only in the breeding teams, from the technicians up to the assistant breeders, even within the breeding teams, the senior breeders, but also there's probably an education gap in the discipline size, in that if they were well aware of what breeders are trying to do and the way they're trying to manipulate genetic variants and understand heritability, trait heritability, I think it would help the whole process. So at some point, it would be good that if there was across the board education, sort of gap filling of not just breeding teams, but non-breeding teams, people associated with the breeders. I think that could be useful, but how we do that is not obvious. Succession planning is always an issue. And so I think it's something that just needs to be continually put in front of senior managers in the different institutions. Okay, so what's next for BPAT? This year, this is our program. So it's going to be a busy program. We're starting to do, this is our attempt to complete IITA assessments. We're basically going through in order that we went through previously. And we're here in East Africa doing IITA cassava and Ghana. Of course, we take advantage of being in the proximity of other programs. Hence, we're doing NARO programs, beans. We're here doing CET programs. Next, we're doing ICRISAT, and then SIP. And we'll focus wherever we can on doing, as I said, NAS programs in East and West Africa. We'll head to West Africa around the middle of the year as well. If there is a need for BPAT, we're certainly prepared to put in a phase 3 proposal. Phase 1 finished in 2020, where towards the end of phase 2, it finishes about this time next year or towards the middle of next year. So phase 3, we're starting to talk about phase 3, 2025 plus. So we have some ideas. I guess it's probably not good to talk too much about phase 3 because this is in development. But we have had an excellent meeting. We had a workshop with the Breeding Resources Reefers team at Erie recently. And we're starting to talk about this idea of dispensing with pre-visit surveys and using breeding program metrics to scale less intensive BPATs. In other words, get data from breeding programs sort of independent of the breeders actually even giving it to us, through the Breeding Resources team, getting data on breeding program genetic variants, a whole range of use of markers, data on multi-environment testing programs, G by E analyses, etc., tricot data, and enabling us to, before we even speak to the breeding teams, get an assessment of where they're at. And so we're going to trial this idea this year, doing a retrospective analysis of some of the assessments that we've done in the last 6 months. So we've done BPAT assessments of the big 3, CIMMYT wheat, CIMMYT maize, and Erie rice. So we want to go into those programs retrospectively, try and trap some of these breeding program metrics to see what answer we get compared to the actual BPATs that we completed. And something that I'd really like to, and we've been talking about this for a number of years, is educationalizing the BPAT process. Can we complete a BPAT and basically come up with a dashboard and show very quickly where breeders are and where they can be if they apply some better breeding processes. Okay, just about end. Okay, I have to acknowledge my team. You know, I'd like to think that the BPAT project has been successful. I've had a terrific team. Sandra McCullough has been there from the outset. Juliana joined later, but she, Sandra in particular, has created these access databases that we use. The amount of detail that goes into them is quite amazing. We use them for pre-visit surveys, for the assessor forms, and now it's really quite amazing how far they've come compared to the initial single worksheet Excel spreadsheets that we received when we first got the grant. So we've got Nimali Ravnadkar, who's also a data analyst, who backs up Sandra, and Jess Lippman, who backs up Juliana. I might add that regrettably all these staff are part-time. So I'm the only full-time staff member of BPAT. Zulfi Jahufa, who's a quantitative geneticist, has joined us the last few years. He's also part-time, but been a great assistance to me. Okay, you know, the BPAT process is only good as the assessment teams. I've been so fortunate to be able to ask a lot of people to do assessments. And I've already made a point about my team. They've been terrific. And under the very last person mentioned there is, of course, Jeff Ellis, who's been great support to the BPAT team. We have bi-weekly meetings, and more recently, Young Wa's come on board, and we've had great discussions about where we are and where we may be, and we'll be interested to hear the feedback from the community, the plant breeding community in the CG, to see what they think of BPAT and where it should go, and we're all ears, and we're prepared to accept all suggestions. And I just wanted to say that in the spirit of continual improvement, we send out BPAT feedback surveys, and we're listening. So there's lots of really good suggestions that we've been given. This is just a snapshot of some of the things that people liked and didn't like, but there is a more comprehensive dashboard of the survey that we will release on our website in the coming weeks. Dorcas, that's all I have, and of course I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Chris. Since my internet is not so good, Lorena is going to lead us in the discussion. I apologize.
Yeah, no problem. Any questions?
Hi, if nobody else has one, I'll ask one if that's okay.
Of course.
Do you now that we're really moving more in the direction of a vision for very tight collaboration between NARS and CG programs, how does the BPAT have to evolve? Do you think it's already adequate for that?
We ask a lot of questions about the network. Okay, so I think it does have to evolve, and I think we probably need to have a better definition of what needs to happen in the network. I know that there was some dialogue about 18 months ago about how the network should look, but I'm not sure that is well entrenched in the CG. So sometimes, we get answers of, well, it's still evolving. So I'm just not sure that it's mature enough yet, Gary. So I'm not sure if that's a good answer to your
Yeah,
question.
I would agree. There isn't a common vision yet. And
Okay.
one more quick question.
Sure.
We're starting in many programs to get a lot of high-value haplotypes validated that need to be deployed. And deploying them is really quite complicated, once you got more than one or two. How much do you look at that, deployment process?
Yeah, in fact, we actually have a question, that specific question about the deployment of haplotypes. And quite often we'll get both the NAS and the CG breeders say, oh yeah, we've CG are giving them to us. Sorry, the CG breeders are saying, yes, we're giving them to the NAS, and the NAS say, yeah, we're receiving them. And so we probably need to, that's on the surface. So we're getting this positive reaction, but I think we need to come up with a way of actually determining what level of haplotype exchange there is. And that might not be easy.
Yeah, we need to be looking at the frequency of these things in the elite germplasm. Thanks.
Right. Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks, Gary. Eduardo.
Yes, thanks, Chris, for the great presentation. I was just wondering, currently how is the results of the BPAT assessment flowing back, to the other platforms like ABI, the heads of breeding, even the donors. Because I guess that there's always been this, question I remember still from many centers talking about, how they try to implement many of the recommendations. But sometimes the funds and the support from the upper leadership doesn't seem to be aligned with the results of the BPAT. Any thoughts, or, discussions that
Yeah,
you've had with the...
Yeah, that's a really good question, Eduardo. So the report goes normally to the most senior person in the institution responsible for breeding programs. And so then it gets distributed from there down. I think the distribution of the reports is really up to the institution. Certainly, Michael Quinn and BMGF have access to the entire set of BPAT assessments, and even others within Michael's team. And so I'm not sure if I've answered the question, but the disconnect between senior leadership and the breeding teams, I'm not totally aware of it, but it probably wouldn't surprise me. I think that may be a challenge for the breeding leads, a communication thing where they probably need to communicate with senior management. But that's where I would be happy to sit on a meeting with the breeding leads and senior managers, DGs, whatever it takes. And because, you're right, sometimes you have DGs that get it completely, or DDGRs, but then others, it's not a high priority. So I think that's probably a fair comment. So, Eduardo, I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, this definitely. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Okay. So there's another question there from Ephraim.
Yeah, good evening or good morning, wherever you are. I'm Ephraim here at TIC Research headquarters in India. So the presentation was good and clear, but I have some or probably one question about impact. Do you restrict this question to breeders, or maybe also you talk with socioeconomists, social sciences and humanities? And on the slide, I could see that you are stressing aspect like the realized genetic gain, for example, but maybe it would be necessary to get into the production environment to see the impact on the farm itself. So these are the two small questions I wanted to ask you.
Ephraim, thank you for that question. So about 18 months ago, it may be longer, 2 years now. No, it's probably even longer than that, 2.5 years. BMGF asked us to add the organizational effectiveness component, to our assessment process. So we contracted an organizational effectiveness expert, Vanda Morgan, to every BPAT that we did, and she did a marvelous job. And she would interview a wide range of institution staff, and not just breeders. So, socioeconomists, the finance department, DDGRs, the DGs, really to try and get a feel for how well the institution was operating and overseeing the running of the breeding programs. That stopped perhaps 12, 18 months ago because she found that there were really a lot of high-level issues that were coming up that there wasn't an easy fix. And because they weren't being addressed, we thought, well, perhaps we just put a halt on that particular part of the assessment. But speaking with Sharifa at Breeding Resources, she's most interested in this aspect of BPAT, the organizational effectiveness component. And what she would like to see happen, and I'm in total agreement, is that we try and subset those aspects of OE that Vanda was looking at to those things that are resolvable. Okay, so so just let's focus on things that we can actually address with the resources and networks that we have set up. So the second part of your question was about realized heritability. And so, look, there has been a big push to test materials in production environments. Even, look, we saw some examples of recent BPATs where stage 1 testing was occurring in production environments with genomic selection. So that's sort of an extreme case, I guess. And it's, that methodology is certainly under review. But I think one has to accept that it is going to be difficult, given the fact that production environments are remote from the headquarters. So there's going to be, a certain amount of cost needed to extract the data. The quality of the data has been a bit of an issue. But still, where there's a will, there's a way, I guess. So, Ephraim, I'm not sure I answered both of your questions.
Yeah, indeed, you respond partially, but concisely. What I think personally is impact, instead of thinking about realized genetic, for instance, or asking DGs, DDGs, maybe it would be necessary to consider the not extension research, but seed system research, because the scale out from the extension research to seed system research, maybe this is where you can find really impact, because the seed is getting to the farmer, to the grower, etc. And then here you can really sense how the program, any breeding program, is making impact. This is what maybe I can suggest.
Yeah, look, a really good point. And this is being addressed. Seed system impact is being addressed by many other investments. Okay. And there may be people on this call that can speak to that. We don't, as part of our assessment, we don't touch on that Dragan, I can see Dragan's got his hand up. Could you, so Dragan from ABI, could you please, did you want to answer that question, or did you have another question?
Chris, can you hear me?
Oh yes, perfectly
Chris,
well.
yeah, we are in Uganda, but not together. So I want to make a comment and to first I would thank you for BPAT efforts and for all that you are doing. I think it's important work, but I would like to make a comment about NARS and to inform the audience about, yeah, when it comes to the CG NARS networks, I'm currently in Uganda and we today finished establishment of the Banana East Africa network. So there is a certain developments depending on the CG center and crop by region network, but I would say from transform perspective that we are progressing. That I think you believe that you were a few days ago or yesterday with Nakri Kasawa with the Suma Williams and his team. So I visited this team in January. So we are now building a network of Kasawa network in East Africa. We finished the establishment of the banana network today. So there are certain development. What I would suggest to BPAT team is more coordination, for example, with Bish and Michael Queen, with our ABI team. You are planning your visit. Yes, we are exchanging emails, but having a better coordination, who is doing what, especially when it comes to the NARS and BPAT assessment of the NARS, that would be appreciated. But as a general comment, we are progressing with the networks, and we have some good examples, but we are open to hear from Chris and his team how we can improve from our end. Alignment and coordination when it comes to the assessment of the NARS is essential. So over to you, Chris, and thank you one more time for your contribution. Thanks.
Thank you, Dragan. Thank you for those comments. We take them on board, and certainly we try and engage with many of the NARS partners as we possibly can. And that's why Dragan, we did Williams cassava program today at Naro. And yeah, so.
Yeah, Chris, that's correct. And I know you. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfectly well.
But this is a kind of sub-coordination, but we should discuss it internally. We were there as a transform 4 weeks ago. Now BPAT is there, and I don't know how that kind of pressure for NARS, what they feel about. We start something. I hope that you were able to see improvement plan that we developed for NARS, for Cassava as a network member. So let's discuss that offline about, especially with Michael and Bish, how we can improve our coordination and efforts with NARS especially. Thanks a lot.
Sure, absolutely. That would be a pleasure. Any more questions? I'm just looking here. Oh, yes, Gustavo. Oh, didn't know Gustavo was on. Gustavo from Mexico, right? Yeah, how are you?
Yeah.
Gustavo.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfectly well.
Yeah. So yeah, good presentation, Chris. Yeah, so
thank you.
Back to the question regarding the comment or question regarding the seed system, and also connecting with what Dragan said, maybe to consider for the future, because now the BPAT, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that the BPAT assess the breeding programs into many different areas and really or evaluate their performance or their progress, but without having a really target for from the breeding teams. No, I mean it's not really compare that against any plan for them to progress. So I think that maybe can be one thing that can come from the networks. Once the networks establish really the future for the breeding networks in general, and that from my perspective should also include somehow part of that seed system too, no? So then the BPAT could evaluate the progress against that that goal, no? And also, of course, review this plan against other areas that maybe are not being considered So that can be one thing to consider. Of course, using the KPIs as a target. No, yeah, just a comment, please. Thank you.
Yeah, no, look, that makes complete sense, Gustavo. I think if there is a clear plan, transparent plan, it would make assessment very easy, wouldn't it? So yeah, I totally agree. Bodo, good to see you.
Yes,
Question, Bodo?
hello, Chris. Thank you for your nice presentation and overview. I really appreciated that. So my question, a little bit of thought about these things. To me, as I have seen the BPAT acting for, let's say now 5 years from my end, you are, or your team is the one that has come in my eyes as a central agent closest to some of these breeding programs, okay? Mostly of the CG, but also of the NARIs. And I've also seen, and I really liked it very much, that this BPAT is taking into account the local settings and the local conditions, these specific individual conditions of all these programs, which seem to be a little bit counteracted by the EIB, ABI, and so far and so forth work, where the tendency is to streamline everything, to align, to standardize, to centralize. So I think these two developments have the right of existence. And so now looking at it from the position of a breeder, one of my professors always used to say that no breeding program is alike of another breeding program. There are always very individual differences, which are totally legitimate. And it depends all on these settings. And there's also the different players there and everything. So I wonder whether the BPAT, because in my eyes, you are the ones who have seen all these different programs and all the different settings. So maybe you are able to give an estimate of how much these different programs differ and vary, and what can be learned out of that to somehow, to facilitate this centralization that we are working on the other side. So now, also having worked with the Transform team for a year now only, I see that there have been, I think, a total of 135 NARIs have been having interaction with CG Center breeding programs, and probably 3/4 or more of these have already been approached by the Transform people and somehow forged into better as they were existing in the past, because we must say this idea of networking is not new. It is just being reinforced now. And so I wonder.
Thanks, Bodo. I think we can make it a bit shorter.
Network.
Because we are over time.
Please let me finish it. So I wonder whether the BPAT can contribute to widening all these different players, to also those that are weaker in the regions, but which are very, very important for the impact to feed these populations there and to crank out sufficient good varieties. So thank you. With two questions on BPAT, these individual differences, and BPAT, the diversity of interaction with all NARIs, not only the few selected ones. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bodo. I understand the essence of your question. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to give you a good answer, but there's no doubt that over 9 years, the BPAT team and now has a good feel of the inner thinking of NAS breeding programs and breeding programs for that matter. And so that we have got an opinion to share. And so I think what would be good to do is for the BPAT, some of the BPAT team members that have been involved in many of these assessments, to get together with people like Bish's team, the Transform team, people like yourself. Let's get together and sort of synthesize all our put together all our learnings and understandings of what's really happening and why. So for example, why are the NARO programs, pretty good programs? Why is that? And so, why are some other NAS programs not strong? And look, it's going to be complicated, but I think, we've got a lot of intel now over a number of years. And so I see your point that you're saying, look, let's learn from our experiences. And I think that's a great idea. And I know that the Transform team have been quite busy, and there's been others too. I mean, there's the seed team, seed equal team, etc. So that. Sorry, Dorcas, long-winded answer.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you everyone for joining. We are about 10 minutes over time. And thank you for the insights about what you've learned so far, Chris, and then for the highlights of areas that we might still need some work on. For the participants, we will be sharing the slides from Chris, and we will also share the recording. I hope it recorded well now that I had internet issues over here. And for Chris, I really apologize. I didn't foresee the internet problems, given that we didn't have any during the week here. So thank you very much. And I wish you all well. And let's meet in our next instance.
Yes, for sure. Thank you, Dorcas. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Dorcas.
Yeah.
Thank you, Christian. Chris, bye.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye everyone. Bye.